I believe that this government is deliberately trying to mislead the general public and just tell you what you want to hear, and I'm going to explain why. Not only do I think it's disingenuous that the government tries to give the impression that they are actively seeking to remove people from the UK that are not supposed to be here, but I believe from what I've read that they are actively seeking to buy houses for people that have entered the country illegally, the same houses that you and I work very hard to pay for. And I'll explain all of this in this video. And as a bonus, I also believe that the government is forcing local authorities to break the law. More about that towards the second half of the video. But first of all, just before I get into the statistics, if you do like someone that says things how they are and neutrally, objectively, and without being pushed by anybody else, please do subscribe to the channel. This is genuinely the truth and you deserve to hear it. So please do subscribe and help my channel grow. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So this tweet put out by the Home Office, or Post if you insist, says the following. 13,500 people with no right to be here removed. Big bold statement, obviously designed for those that are interested in having people removed from the UK that have no right to be here. Now, all of this, just the caveat, as I always say, and I will always say, this is not to speak against those who are in genuine need of refuge and protection. That is not the point of this video. It is not to divide and cause hatred and all of that sort of stuff. That is not the purpose of this video. This is calling out what I believe is misleading information designed to make you think in a certain way, and it's the age-old propaganda. It's not conspiracy theory nonsense, and I'll explain exactly why I say it. And it's their own statistics. As a barrister, I can tell you one of the best ways of calling out something and making your argument is to use what the person or the organization themselves have said previously, or even at the same time, as it turns out here. So get a load of this. So they say here, 13,500 people with no right to be here removed. Now all of this then depends on the definition and the interpretation of removed. Does it mean that they've been removed in a sense of, well, they've been sent a letter to say, excuse me, mister, you've overstayed your visa. Did you realize that you need to leave now? And the person goes, oh, I'm really sorry, didn't realize. Yeah, I will get on a plane and leave. Is that a removal? Or is it the other end of the spectrum where immigration teams turn up armed to the tooth and forcibly remove somebody, put them on a plane and deport them? That's the other end of the spectrum. What does removed mean in this context here? Well, that's when we get on to the definition of what they really mean. There are voluntary returns and enforced returns. And even then, the definition of return is defined and explained in their own guidance, which is something that I'll come back to, because again, it just makes clear that I think that what they're saying is misleading and disingenuous. The term returns here, by their own guidance, and I've had people write to me and say it's wrong, and it's not wrong. This is from their own guidance here. It says the data counts the number of returns rather than individuals. One individual may be returned more than once in a given period, and if that was the case, would be counted more than once in the statistics. So if 2,000 people are returned twice, that's 4,000 returns, not 4,000 people. You'll remember a while ago I talked about another post that said 9,500 people, or 9,400 I think it was, people have been removed from the UK. And that wasn't, well, according to their own guidance, that's not true, because 9,400 or whatever it was, returns does not necessarily mean people. And their own guidance says as much, so at least stick to your own guidance. So their post says 13,500 people with no right to be here removed. So does that mean they've been forcibly removed? Now, this is not the only time that they've been caught out and fact-checked. So even fullfact.org looked at this 9,400 people who have no right to be here returned, and the quote there was that this was a 30% increase on the numbers of the previous year. And they said, well, they're unable to verify, but there was an increase, but it wasn't for the same equivalent period. And that's not all either. When we look at Again, Home Office own transparency data, returns from the UK between July and October 2024. So July and October. When we look at this post here, okay, this is posted this morning at 10:30. They say 13,500 people with no right to be here removed. But when we look at this, okay, it goes up to October. This says between the 5th of July and 28th of October, a total of 9,400 returns, so returns may be the same person more than once, were recorded, including both enforced and voluntary returns, which is what I said. Voluntary is you just left because you've overstayed. So that could include really a voluntary return because you've overstayed a visa, you're not supposed to be here, you get on a plane because you've been reminded or whatever, you get on a plane and leave. That's a voluntary return. Of this 9,400 returns, there were 2,590 enforced returns of people with no right to remain in the UK. Again, the 2,590 is not necessarily people, it's returns. So they enforced. So maybe a van of people did turn up and physically remove somebody and then put them on a plane and physically make them remove. That's a possibility here. But that is a far cry from 13,500 people, etc. So it's not entirely clear what they really mean there. But it's not even as simple as that. When we move to their official statistics on this spreadsheet here, the highlighted line, year ending September 2024. Enforced returns for that whole year was only 7,708, and of which 2,576 were asylum returns. Now, I stress I am not in any way speaking against those that are genuine refugees. I have many friends that arrived here because they were fleeing a place of hellish conditions, and they are lovely people, they're good friends of mine, and so this is not to speak out against those that are in genuine need of refuge. That's not the point of this video. But what is the point of this video is that I believe that these posts are designed to make people believe that the government is doing what they want. It is age-old propaganda, and I'm calling it out because I don't believe that this is the whole picture. I don't believe that this is entirely accurate. At least the inference of this information is not going to be entirely accurate, and I'll tell you why. I think the average person on the street, let me know in the comments what you understand this to mean. I should have said that at the beginning, but let me know what you understand this post to mean and whether you think I'm wrong, and I'll be happy to accept that you think that I'm wrong. It's just my opinion. But I think that the average reasonable person on the street may well reasonably infer that this means that they have forcibly removed 13,500 people that have entered this country illegally, perhaps on small boat or by other means, and they've physically and forcefully removed them. Because it says 13,500 people with no right to be here removed. It doesn't say how they arrived, it doesn't say how they were removed and whatever. But the statistics for the whole year ending September 2024, enforced returns was only 7,708. Voluntary returns, on the other hand, 23,803, of which 5,700 asylum voluntary returns. Those, I believe it says here, the notes, asylum-related returns relate to cases where there's been an asylum claim or further submissions at some stage prior to the return. This would include asylum seekers whose asylum claims have been withdrawn, refused, or who have been exhausted any rights of appeal. Those returned under third country provisions, as well as those granted asylum protection but removed for other reasons such as criminality. So they've removed criminals as well. So this is not to be entirely unfair. They have removed. There's been a lot of removals, and that counts for both voluntary returns, which includes those that may have been convicted of some crime or such like, and they've been voluntary returns, or they've been enforced returns. It includes all of those. So it's not to be entirely unfair. They are doing this work. Now, my point of this video here, in part at least, is not to bash and say that they're doing nothing at all, but I think that the way they're doing it is to respectfully is to make the average person believe a thing, and it's age-old propaganda. I don't think it's entirely transparent, hence the video. But not only that, when we come to reports that I look at. So there's firstly by the BBC and secondly by The Guardian. We look at what's going on here. This was from October. Councils to buy homes for refugees fleeing conflict. Now again, there's a humanitarian aspect that we are supposed to and we have the moral obligation to protect those that are fleeing conflict and so on. This is not to speak out against those in the slightest, but when you see statistics like that, it's not necessarily the full picture. It's telling you what they think that you want to read and hear about. But you may not support, however much you may believe that we should be supporting those that are fleeing war-torn countries and conflict and so on, you may or may not support this idea here. Now this says new housing for refugees is to be bought by a council as part of what it calls a moral duty to protect people fleeing conflicts abroad. This was Northumberland County Council, reportedly by the BBC, spending £1.2 million to buy and refurbish 7 properties, mostly in the southeast of the county, to house Ukrainians fleeing, seeking safety from the Russian invasion, etc., etc. And that's not the only one as well. Just recently, The Guardian says asylum seekers will be housed in disused care homes and student accommodation under the Home Office plans, according to a source, you understand, to The Guardian, according to a source, Home Office plans to find 800 new accommodation sites. So is that a house or a site or what? A site could be multiple housing. And cut a bill that's risen to £5.5 million a day. They say Home Office sources have confirmed to The Guardian that the fundamental changes to the asylum accommodation are underway in a bid to save millions of pounds. Now, of course, it says here about 35,000 asylum seekers are currently housed in hotels, a reduction from last year. They spent £4.7 billion on asylum support. I think the total is about £6.5 billion, and it says here of which about £3 billion spent on hotels. £3 billion spent on hotels. So their plan, instead of spending the money on the hotels, which a lot of people are annoyed by, it says the new plan is to roll out 800 new accommodation sites that are neither military bases nor hotels and include care homes and vacant student accommodation. According to Freedom Information data obtained by the Lib Dems last year, 94 care homes across 46 different local authorities in England are lying empty, awaiting repairs or refurbishment. Now, that could be for a number of reasons. It could be restrictions, because obviously if a house is or a care home is in such a condition that they can't house people, they need to do those refurbishments. But if the costs have gone up and they're waiting for the money, etc., then obviously they can't do that. So the Home Office is apparently looking for these places to buy up and house them with asylum seekers. Make of all that what you will. Let me know whether you think I'm right or not in the comments. But we don't end there, because I believe that the government, in its policy for VAT on private school fees and thus forcing thousands of children out of private schools looking for places in state schools, as you remember, Surrey and Woking have no places available for years 9, 10 and 11. No places for these children to move. This policy, in my view, having looked at the legislation which I will show you, makes me believe that this government is forcing these local authorities, if they're in that position, to be in breach of their statutory duty. So this policy, in my view, is forcing local authorities to break the law. And you'll remember that I said before, the Independent Schools Council is taking action against the government on this VAT levy, in part under the European Convention on Human Rights, because part of this obviously is just so bad that it breaches certain rights. Now, let's look at, I've got a few places open here. Let me start with this one. It may surprise you to learn that the duty of parents is to ensure that their children are educated, not that they go to school. But usually they will liaise with a local school and arrange homeschool if that's what they're doing. But let's be honest, most parents, with respect, are not going to be in the best position to educate their child for English, maths and science and languages and humanities and so on. You either don't have the time or you don't have the skills. If you've got the time, you may not have the skills. And so this is just unrealistic to receive proper education at home. But nonetheless, there is no duty to put them in a school. I'll come back to that in a moment. The duty on parents under Section 7 of the Education Act 1996 is to cause, and the word shall is what gives rise to the duty. Every parent of every child of compulsory school age, which is once they reach their 5th birthday, is to cause him to receive efficient full-time education suitable to his age, ability, aptitude, and any special educational needs, either by regular attendance at school or otherwise. So it's the duty of the parent to ensure that they receive education. So actually thinking about this, this policy may also be forcing parents to be in breach of their statutory duty as well. And the compulsory school age is when the child reaches 5, and it ceases when they are 16. Now, the interesting point here is Section 436A of the Act is a duty of the local authority to identify children who are not receiving education. So the local authority has a statutory duty to find out and list those children in their catchment area that are not registered pupils at a school and not receiving suitable education. So this is the first statutory duty I'm talking about upon the local authorities with regard to children. Now we move to Section 14. If there's no school available, the local authority has a problem, because as I said, the parent has to make sure that child receives an education, whether at school or otherwise, and the local authority has a duty to find out whether or not they are receiving that education. And in doing all of that, the local authority under Section 14 has a statutory duty, where it says the word shall here in subsection 1, a local authority shall secure that sufficient schooling for providing primary education and education that is secondary education are available for their area. The schools available for an area shall not be regarded as sufficient for the purposes of this section unless they are sufficient in number, character, and equipment to provide for, emphasis, all pupils the opportunity of appropriate education. And so, in English, if there are no places, which there are not in Surrey and Woking for years 9, 10 and 11, because they've ousted this government by virtue of its VAT policy on school fees, have ousted thousands of children from, I think it's thousands of children from that area, from the statistics that I've read. They've ousted children from those private schools because the parents cannot afford the fees, because they are £3,000, £5,000, £8,000 a year extra per child. So if you've got 3 children and it's, let's say at the bottom end, £3,000, that's another £9,000, £10,000 with some extra fees and whatever that they have to pay, that they have to find. Now, I don't think many people can just say, oh, here we go, reach into the drawer, here's another £10,000 just to dump on this. They'd made sensible choices. They'd put their child into education. They've probably worked really hard to do that. Most people work multiple jobs, or they scrimp and save. They don't go on holidays and they don't have nice cars, etc., etc. They scrimp, they save, they work really hard to send their children to private school, and then bam, this government says, no, VAT on top, 20% of those fees if they've got 3 children, and if it were £3,000, I think in a lot of places it's more than £3,000, then it's close to £10,000 extra. They don't have it, so they have to withdraw them. Then they are told by the local authority to ring around the schools to find a place. The school says there's no place, ring somewhere else. The schools say, speak to the local authority. The local authority says, go on the waiting list. They go round and round and round in circles, and ultimately they find, and ultimately it's surfaced, there are no places. At least in Surrey, this has been the first one to really blow this up and say years 9, 10, 11, there are no places. And so if there are no places, the local authority is in trouble, because they have a statutory duty to ensure that the schools provided are sufficient in number, character, and equipment for all pupils that should have that opportunity of appropriate education. And if not, they are in breach of duty. And it's for that reason that I believe that this government is forcing its own local authorities and even parents potentially into a position of breaching their statutory duty. So I think some law firm somewhere is going to have some field day with a group litigation action against the local authority for breach of statutory duty, and probably drafting in and pulling in the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, because she ultimately is responsible for this and she's caused it. She doesn't seem to acknowledge that that's really going on. She doesn't seem to care that that's really going on. In fact, everything that I've read makes me feel that she is being actually quite spiteful about the whole thing, quite careless, and frankly quite evil about it. That is my personal opinion, and I'm entitled to express it, because this situation is destroying education for many, many children. That is my view. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please do make sure you like the video and share it with somebody. I am going to keep bringing you the raw, objective truth here, because I don't see many people doing that. But it's my duty to you since I started this channel. Now, hopefully, any of the naysayers can see how the law and current events with news and politics and the way this government's behaving are very much intertwined. This is the law that effectively the government is screwing over local authorities, children, parents, and everybody else. And that's without touching on all the other subjects, such as employer national insurance, etc. But let me know what you think in the comments. This is exhausting, but I will keep at it, and you deserve the truth. So for that alone, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.